Go inside the Crimson Tide with your hosts Rodney Orr and Gary Harris, keeping you informed on everything Alabama. And now, Tider Insider TV.
My senior year in high school, we won the state championship. In the state championship game, I got a chip bone in my ankle, and they put a cast on it for 6 weeks. So we went right from football to basketball, so I had to sit and watch. We practiced in an armory above the basket. I could never shoot very well. And I used to sit up in top of the armory above the basket and see how big the basket was from looking above instead of below. So I developed a lot of confidence in my ability to shoot the ball by watching the ball get shot and seeing how big the basket was, because it always looked pretty small to me when I was down on the court.
Trip down memory lane for Coach Saban. A lot of basketball talk yesterday as well. We'll get to his point regarding that basketball memory. That's coming up later in the show. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Tider Insider TV, the very first Tider hosted by yours truly. But of course, Rodney, always here every week. Gary Harris is calling the Alabama softball game tonight, so I'm sitting in alongside Rodney. I'm Brandon Kamerman. It's my first Tider Insider, not my first drink though, of Wild Cherry Diet Pepsi. I will say probably my first time drinking it on air, though.
Yeah.
There you go. Tastes good. Of course, Tider Insider presented each and every week by Buffalo Rock. We're a week and a half into spring football, but only 2 practices in. Alabama took last week off for spring break, but tomorrow will mark the Tide's 3rd practice of the spring. Rodney, you've been to both practices so far. Any early impressions, anything that has caught your attention through 2 practices?
Well, I think the first thing you look at when you go out there is obviously they lost some really good players from last year. I mean, you look on the defensive line, they lost guys like Ashawn Robinson, Jaron Reed, DJ Petway, Darren Lakes, another big body that they lost. But you also see a lot of really big, strong, physical, athletic players out there. You talk about all the #1 recruiting classes, you see them out there. A lot of really impressive defensive linemen. You're talking about Deshaun Hand, Dalvin Tomlinson, Jonathan Allen, even though he is in a black jersey, and Josh Frazier. Several others that are really impressive-looking specimens in that front 7 in the linebacker core. They've got a lot of tremendous athletes in the secondary. We know about a lot of those guys. And, Brandon, when you look on the offensive line where games are won, Alabama's loaded with a lot of young talent, a lot of young potential. And, they got 4 quarterback prospects, outstanding wide receiver core, O.J. Howard back at tight end, and some really potentially outstanding running backs.
And as they try to mix in some of these new players with the veteran players, also trying to mix in some new coaches, we've had a chance to see, obviously, these new coaches like Brent Key, Jeremy Pruitt. Anything catch your attention, maybe about the intensity level of some of these coaches that you've seen through 2 of the practices?
Well, I just think that when you look at, first of all, on the offensive line, you've got Mario Cristobal, who was the offensive line coach, now coaching tight ends as well as offensive tackles. And I know that last night O.J. Howard really expressed a lot of excitement working under Coach Cristobal, talking about how he really pushes them hard. And I know Brent Key has an outstanding reputation as an offensive line coach, now coaching the centers and guards. And Jeremy Pruitt, I think, is one of the best young coaches in the country, not only as a recruiter and a talent evaluator, but also as a rising coach, as a defensive coordinator. And Derek Ansley, the same thing. I think he's a tremendous hire in the secondary. He's a guy that was developed in the Alabama system under Nick Saban. I think it's a great hire in the secondary.
You heard the players talking about Pruitt. It seems like they're pretty excited.
Oh, absolutely. The players love Jeremy Pruitt.
Of course, Alabama has a whole class of incoming freshmen not currently practicing with the Tide. That includes a new commit, Gary Johnson, a linebacker from Dodge City Community College in Kansas. He'll join Alabama this fall. Rodney, another linebacker. What did the Alabama coaching staff see in Gary Johnson?
Well, I think when you look at him, he is a very fast, very athletic player. I think he fits a lot of what they've got. He's maybe not quite as big as some of the past inside linebackers they've had, but again, he's very speedy, has a lot of instincts. You can watch him sometimes. He can read the plays there. You'll see him just cut off the runner and make the play, strip the ball. He makes a lot of plays. Later in the film, there's a highlight of him just reading the quarterback's eyes and picking a pass off and returning it for a touchdown. He's just a playmaker and brings a lot of speed and athletic ability. Again, obviously one of the top defensive players in the country in the junior college ranks.
When does Alabama like to bring in junior college players? Is there sort of a philosophy they have with wanting to bring in players from that level?
Well, I think when you look at it, first of all, they're looking for players that can provide immediate help, and they've had a lot of success in that area, going all the way back to 2008 when Terrence Cody came in at the nose guard position, kind of turned the defense around, and they've had several other guys through the years that have made valuable contributions to the team. And, you know, another big thing about this particular player, Gary Johnson, is he's on track to graduate in December. So that means he could come in next January, go through spring practice, and that's a big opportunity for him to really develop, and especially when you're considering you're losing a guy like Reuben Foster after next season. Gives him an opportunity to come in, get acclimated through spring practice, and then go into the summer workouts. And hey, by the time he gets to August camp, he's really, you know, on pace where he should be.
Never can have enough linebackers, huh?
Absolutely.
We got more football coming, still to come on Tider Insider Television. More from Nick Saban on the return of an injured starter. Plus, the Alabama basketball team was bounced in the first round of the NIT. Was Avery Johnson's first season a success? We'll discuss. As always, later in the show, we're welcoming some of your phone calls, emails, tweets. See the information on your screen right there. Go ahead, give us a call. 348-WVUA, that's 348-9882. We'll be right back after the break. The only show takes you inside the Crimson Tide. Tider Insider TV returns coming up after the break.
We've won 4 games against top 25 teams. We've played against, you know, a lot of terrific teams. Wichita State, Notre Dame. You know, we've had some huge wins this year, but we just didn't have that sustained effort towards the end of the season. A lot of it was new territory for our guys, especially when we were on the bubble watch and people were talking about we were one of the last 4 in, and we had a big win at LSU. And after that win at LSU, we just haven't been the same team.
Not the same team here either. A couple, you know. Yeah. Welcome back to Tider Insider TV again. Gary Harris is at the softball game. I'm filling in for Gary. My name is Brandon Kamerman. You know Rodney, at one point this season, Alabama was right on that NCAA tournament bubble. But a rough finish to the regular season dropped the Tide into the NIT, where they were promptly knocked out by Creighton in the first round. So Avery Johnson's first year, the team was picked to finish second to last in the SEC. They ended up finishing 10th overall. Do you think Alabama fans should be happy with a first-round exit in the NIT?
Well, I don't know if happy really with the way that the season went is the word, but I would say this. I would say that Avery Johnson has his program on track. I don't think there's any question about that. He inherited a very difficult situation. Let's be honest. He didn't quite have the players that a lot of most of the other teams in the SEC have. There's a reason why they were picked second to the last in the SEC heading in. I thought they did a fantastic job. They were competitive in every game. The only games that they really weren't competitive in would have been the 3 losses to Kentucky that off the top of my head. So I think when Avery Johnson gets his players, has an opportunity to get some of his players in here, it's clear that the program's headed in the right direction. Again, they were very competitive. They had 5 straight wins there at one point. They had the win on the road at LSU. They had a big win at Florida, which they hadn't done since, 1994 or something like that. So I think he did a tremendous job in his first year. I think he instilled a lot of the things into the program that he wanted to get instilled, and the discipline and all those things. Now it's just a matter of getting his players. The
energy was there, too.
Absolutely.
They filled the stands a lot of the games.
Absolutely.
So. Speaking of basketball, earlier we heard Alabama football coach Nick Saban talk about his basketball days, how an injury in high school helped him see the game from a different angle and in turn become a better shooter. He compared that to Robert Foster. Foster will be a junior wide receiver for the Tide this fall. The former 5-star prospect had 10 catches for 116 yards and 2 touchdowns before suffering a season-ending shoulder injury in the Ole Miss game that was last year. Saban said Foster is close to fully recovered from that injury. Rodney, what type of impact do you expect from the explosive receiver?
Well, I think when you look at Robert Foster, obviously him coming back, that gives Alabama, just another receiver. When you're talking about top players, you're talking about Calvin Ridley or Darius Stewart. Now you've got Robert Foster, those 3 guys on the field together. And you have to remember last year, when he was playing, Calvin Ridley was still just a young freshman. He hadn't really started to mature yet. Our Darius Stewart really didn't hit his stride till about the middle of the season. Now you're going to have 3 guys that are really talented. Then you've got Garrick Dieter coming in, the transfer from Bowling Green, who put up huge numbers, 94 receptions, over 1,000 yards, and 10 touchdowns last year. So I think when you talk about that wide receiver core with Foster there, certainly it's going to be one of the top units on the team and one of the top wide receiver units in the SEC. And they've got some younger players, too, that I think could contribute. Dalen Charlotte's one of those who will be a sophomore, played a little bit last year as a freshman. So they've got a lot of talent at the wide receiver spot, and I think Foster's a big play guy.
Not to mention O.J. Howard and what
Absolutely.
he did. And so my question is, what do you think, is there going to be room for Foster? You know, how's the ball going to be spread around?
There's always room. And what happens is sometimes one guy will have a big game or two big games, and then you might not see him, and then another guy steps up and has a big game. They all play their roles. So when you have that many weapons, you know, really it makes it very difficult for the defense. They don't have an opportunity to really focus on one guy. So with those weapons they've got, with O.J. Howard, and with what I think the development of Bo Scarborough as a runner and as a receiver, I think Alabama has a chance to be a really explosive offense, because I think the offensive line is going to be really good, and I think they have some quarterbacks that they can develop.
Alabama gymnastics back in Tuscaloosa as the 1 seed in next week's NCAA regional. We'll hear from head coach Dana Duckworth after nearly winning the team's third straight SEC championship. And next, we're welcoming your phone calls. Give us a call, emails, tweets. See the information on the screen. Interact with Tider Insider TV right now. Go ahead, give us a call, send us an email, or contact us on social media. We'll be right back. Again, the only show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide. Tider Insider TV is coming up right after the break. The Alabama gymnastics team waited in agony for the final score at the SEC championships over the weekend. In the end, though, it was the Florida Gators with the top score at the meet, beating the Tide by only 1/4 of a tenth of a point. The Tide will host an NCAA regional on April 2nd, hoping to build on its impressive showing in North Little Rock.
There's no doubt that our ladies know that with the talent that we have and the focus of discipline the next 2 weeks to prepare us for the regional championship, to then go on, God willing, to the national championship, that they are capable of anything, and anything can happen. And I think that it showed them that we will battle with the best because we are the best.
Welcome back to the best television show in Tuscaloosa, Tider Insider TV. Gary Harris is calling Alabama softball. I'm Brandon Kamerman. We'll have an update from Rhodes Stadium coming up later in the show, but let's go right to the phone lines right now. We'll start out with CB in Tuscaloosa. CB, what's up?
Ain't nothing going on. How y'all doing, folks?
Doing well.
Hey, Rodney, what about the raw oysters? Did you test any out?
CB, I'm sorry, buddy. I'm just not a raw oyster guy.
What about fried?
No, I stay away from fried food as well.
I wouldn't have told that. But anyhow, know you had a good time. I tell you, we are, of course, I didn't like the way that gymnastic ends, but, you know, I like him. You know, I just like Bama. Can't help it. But, you know, we going these last few years without a starting quarterback. We don't really know, I don't guess who this one is, but when you win a national championship, what does it matter?
Good point, CB. Good point. I think when you look at Alabama and the players that they've had and the job the coaches have done over the last 2 years, Lane Kiffin, we talked about many times when Lane Kiffin first got here, the job he did at Tennessee with Jonathan Crompton in 2009. And he did the same thing with Blake Sims in 2014. Sims threw for 3,487 yards and 28 touchdowns. Who would have guessed it? And then last year, a lot of people doubted Jake Coker. He throws for over 3,000 yards, leads Alabama to a national championship. He's 14-0 as a starter. I mean, they just did a fantastic job with those quarterbacks, developing in them, and they have 4 really good guys right now that I think that they can develop into winners just like they did those guys.
Do you think the mentality of Coach Saban is the same maybe as some other coaches around the country? You know, in other programs that maybe aren't as well-rounded as Alabama, sometimes the quarterback has to carry the team. That may not be the case here. So do you think that affects his decision-making in choosing quarterback?
Well, certainly. I think when you look at what they really want is a guy, first of all, that's not going to get them beat. They want a guy that can manage the game, keep them out of bad situations, not turn the ball over, and make a play every now and then when he has to. And Blake Sims did it a couple of years ago. Obviously, he had Amari Cooper, but he did a fantastic job and didn't turn the ball over very much until later in the year. And last year, Jake Coker did the same thing. I mean, he really kind of took the bull by the horns in the Ole Miss game and started, you know, developing from there. And I think when you look at it, that's really what they want. They want somebody who can manage the team. They don't want to put everything on that quarterback, and they don't have to.
It's obviously something we're going to continue talking about probably right up until fall camp or right until the first
Definitely.
game, maybe.
A lot of people want to know about the quarterback, but here's the thing. I don't think we're going to know anything really until August, sometime right before the game, first game against USC.
All right, thanks, CB, for the call. We'll go to Tommy in Talladega now. Next call. What's up, Tommy?
Hey, how y'all doing?
Doing well.
How do y'all feel the progress of the women's basketball team and the men's baseball team is? It seems to be they're in a lull. It's, it doesn't seem like whether they've been there and at the baseball team and they just don't seem to be moving up.
Yeah, Tommy, the good thing, though, is we're coming off a weekend that saw Alabama take down LSU in a series, take 2 out of 3, and LSU's a top 10 team. So coming off a big series win, and Alabama actually early in the season on the baseball side has done some really good things and shown that they're capable. And they have some really great young freshmen, some young players. So there's really an opportunity for Alabama baseball there. Now, as for the women's basketball team, it was an up and down season, finished right around 500, but they did make the NIT. There is talent there. However, there are reports that Karila Middlebrook is leaving the team, and she was one of their best players. So, I think there are some question marks, but I think they're still moving in the right direction when you look at some of the big wins that they've had so far.
Yeah, in the basketball, I think she's doing a pretty good job of recruiting. In baseball, I mean, they've started off pretty well. It's a little bit difficult to complain where they are right now. Going down to LSU, Baton Rouge, winning the first 2 games, could have probably taken game 3, got nipped there. So I think that's a fantastic series to win down there in Baton Rouge. Nobody really thought that was going to happen. So I think they've started really well. I think the pitching's strong. I think in the first game against LSU, they got 12 hits, so the offense maybe is coming around. If those two come together like that, they're going to be tough to beat.
Speaking of baseball, we'll have an update and see as those baseball and softball games are in process, and we'll take more of your phone calls as well, emails, tweets. You see it right there. Give us a call, send us an email, check us out on Twitter. We'll be right back. The only show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide, right here on Tider Insider TV, right after the break. The Alabama softball team's currently in action at Rhodes Stadium, top of the 3rd inning. That's where Gary Harris is, of course. Alabama softball up 3-0 on Alcorn State. Baseball just underway, taking on UAB at Regions Field. But we're going to get right back to the phone lines and start with Harold in Anniston. Harold, what's going on?
Hey, how you doing, guys?
Doing well.
Hey, Rodney, I got a question for you, man. Tony Brown, I know he's supposed to be suspended right now, man, but this kid has got so much raw ability, man. If they could just get him straightened out, I think this guy could be one of the best in the country, man. What do you think?
Harold, I couldn't agree with you more. I think Tony Brown's extremely talented. When you talk about a guy who has really good size for a defensive back, he can play corner, he can play safety, he's played the star position. He's very athletic, he's extremely fast. He can do so many things. He's a great athlete, and was an All-American in track last year for Alabama. So I agree with you. I mean, he's an outstanding talent. Now, what his suspension status is, we really don't know because Nick Saban said last week he didn't know. So we'll have to wait and see what happens on that. Can he start for Alabama? I think he's certainly talented enough to. Will he? Maybe someday.
Yeah, and in terms of the defensive backs overall, obviously lose Cyrus Jones, one of the better corners, but how does Tony Brown fit into that equation as the team moves forward?
Well, he started some as a true freshman. I mean, he started the Florida game and a couple of other games, so he's certainly got the ability back there as a corner. He has worked at safety some, as I mentioned. There's a lot of competition. Marlon Humphrey's back. Minka Fitzpatrick, who had an outstanding freshman year at the star position, can play corner as well. They've got Kendall Sheffield, who I think is going to be a really outstanding cornerback, who was redshirted last year as a true freshman. So there's a lot of talent there. They've got some guys coming in like Shaheem Carter. Jared Maiden's another outstanding player they have coming in at the corner spot. And all these guys are versatile. Some of them could end up at safety, but there's a lot of competition. So, I mean, if you want to compete, you have to do the things you have to do both on and off the field. And I think Tony is an outstanding talent. And I think if anybody can get the whole situation straightened out, it's Nick Saban.
Does it surprise you with how Coach Saban dealt with the whole suspension? Obviously it came right before the national championship, and you know, obviously there were some questions about what happened. You know, he was pretty public that he was suspended, but wasn't going to go into details. Surprised you that Tony Brown is at least back with the team and ready to compete?
Well, I think they have a great relationship, first of all. I think one of the main reasons Tony Brown came to Alabama out of Beaumont, Texas, was because he loved Nick Saban. So I think they have an outstanding relationship. Obviously, there's things he has to do to conform to, all right? But I'm not really surprised that he's with the team. I don't know the details of the suspension, but I think Nick Saban has proven time and time again that he gives guys opportunities to overcome, and he's been very successful in helping guys do that. And I think when you look at Tony Brown, maybe he's a project for Nick Saban. But I think, you know, if Tony conforms to Coach Saban, I think he's got a chance to be a standout player.
Well, and a former standout player for the Crimson Tide is coming back as a coach of the Crimson Tide. Plus, another former player is looking for his next opportunity in the NFL. We'll have those both issues coming up next in Tider Insider TV. Well, Trent Richardson looking to get back to the NFL. The former Alabama running back is trying to sign on with the Baltimore Ravens today. Ravens head coach John Harbaugh said the team has an unofficial agreement with Trent. Harbaugh encouraged the former Heisman Trophy candidate to continue working hard. Expects him to be at the team's organized team activities next month. Alabama also added a former player to its staff. Former defensive lineman Josh Chapman was named assistant strength and conditioning coach. Chapman was a fifth-round pick by the Indianapolis Colts in 2012, released before the start of the 2015 season. Thoughts on Chapman?
Well, I think it's a big pickup. A lot of people may not remember this. He was originally committed to Auburn until Nick Saban got here and flipped him to Alabama.
Of course, he went to Hoover High School. And I can't say our beautiful shirts, but Rodney is wearing the beautiful shirts provided by the Locker Room, downtown Tuscaloosa, home of the original Elephant Wear. Go by and see Alex Gatewood and his courteous staff. You could also go on their website. That's locker-room.biz. It was a fun one here. Of course, filling in for Gary. We'll have highlights tonight at 10 from the softball game. And a replay of Tider Insider is at 10:30. Thanks again for joining us tonight. I'm Brandon Kamerman. This is Rodney. Or, again, replay 10:30 after the 10 o'clock news. Have a good night.